Tape Deck Media.
Good morning, faithful listeners, Ruddle Maniacs and Ruddaholics. Welcome back for another week of Ruddle Me This. As always, I am your host, Taylor Ruddle, sometimes known as the Eradicator. Delighted to have you back for another episode. We've got a great interview today. This is one that we've had in the works for several years now. We finally managed to tear it up, so I'm very excited to get this out to you. We'll get the plugs in quickly. If you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know I have got a comedy taping coming up this weekend, the 4th of May, 2024, at 8 p.m. We are filming my hour comedy special, Rudzilla, at the Canterbury Cancer Centre in their delightful function room. We're going to be donating 25% of the ticket money to the Cancer Society, so it's a fantastic cause to get behind. If you want to support me, you can also support the Cancer Society by doing so. It's my show from 2019. I've revived it. I'm going to do all the jokes one last time and then record them and chuck them up online somewhere and retire them forever. So this will be your last chance to see all of the Japan material. One other quick plug, the night before that, on the 3rd of May 2024, I'm going to be at Winnebago's Rangiora doing Beats by Bingo. The last one absolutely popped off, so if you're out in that area, come along and you can win some fantastic prizes. They're really generous prizes, actually. Oh, Beats by Bingo is magical, not magical bingo. It is magical, but it's musical bingo. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this on the show before. Head to Beats by Bingo on Facebook for more information about that. And if you want to get tickets to the Rudzilla taping, go to www.taylorruddle.com/Rudzilla and you can purchase your tickets there. One other thing I thought would be good to show you before we get into the interview, because this is actually quite a short episode. We're on a real time frame there. Chris is a very busy man. He has children, which, as you can understand, take up a lot of your time. And we've been trying to tee this podcast up for ages. We found a window, and so I wanted to be as respectful as I could to his time. So it's just under 40 minutes roundabout. So what I thought I might do to pad up the time a little bit is I want to read you a review. I got my first ever review for one of my comedy shows. I got this review at the Dunedin Fringe in 2024. The review was done by a company called Bad Apple, who were kind enough to send a reporter or a reviewer down to check out the show. Like I said, it's my first ever comedy review, which is a kind of a big deal for me as a comedian. I've never really been super into like the arts, so it makes me feel relatively accepted to have a review of myself out there. What's cool about Bad Apple is they are like a platform for like a queer and LGBT writers predominantly. You don't have to be a part of that community to be reviewed by them, which was great. And they just review some really cool stuff. So head along to badapple.gay, which is their web address, which is freaking awesome. So I'm going to read out I'll read my review. And then once we've gotten through that, we will get into the interview with Chris Ingham. So here we go. It's the end of a long Wednesday. The sun is cutting sideways. I'm tired. Will I ever laugh again? In the triangular corner of Inch Bar, an intimate audience has assembled. There are a lot of loud voices all at once. This particular viewer is feeling suspiciously hard to please. A pint of bookbinder in one hand and a comfortable seat should see me right. Taylor Ruddle's Panic at the Buffet stand-up show is about anxiety and food, two things I happen to be expert in, having been fat, female, and seasonally depressed for the entirety of my memorable life. Laughing is less familiar territory, but could be an excellent tool for the reclamation of power surrounding such anxiety. All this rationalization, just to get into the door. Ruddle let his audience know that the show is based on 5 real-life panic attacks he has had around or about food, as a fat man, I assume. Ruddle came on stage to perform with a real smooth gusto. I appreciated the way he engaged with the audience and involved them in the show. After Ruddle introduced himself as a former alt kid and recovering bogan, he located us all in the social geographies of Te Waipounamu. A couple of girls from Tauranga moved south, a Southland son and a farmer, a couple of local couples, a crew, a few dreams of super clean DCs and trucks with cut suspension, black skinny jeans. The show included notes on personal aesthetics from the comedian who was clad casually all in black, though I found myself imagining him in a pink sequin suit and pointy shoes, sparkling to match his showman's spirit. I only wish he wouldn't have disagreed with audience suggestions or turned away the guy who started onlooking halfway through because I could tell it interrupted his flow. Just make a joke about it, bro. I don't want to spoil the show, but I'll mention the excellent reference to Yu-Gi-Oh! As a protector, the Norse tree of life, the too big vocabulary, and the tendency to overthink. Ruddle's show is a fantastic investigation into the effects of anti-intellectualism in New Zealand, of self-realization, and the true dangers of small-town four-square checkouts. The one-liners laced throughout the panic at the buffet worked nicely to punctuate the evening. I don't go to a lot of comedy shows, but that night found myself incredibly grateful for a laugh at the end of a long day. Thanks for making us all feel a bit more human, Taylor, and ngā mihi nui to the Dunedin Fringe crew too, for bringing life to the city. So that was written by Isla Thomas. That's the reviewer from badapple.gay, and you can check it out by visiting the Bad Apple website yourself. And I was stoked to read my review for the first time, because usually I've seen some people get some pretty rough reviews. Like, I don't think the reviewers would be upset by me saying that most of the reviewers don't really visit stand-up comedy shows before, and that tends to be reflected in sort of what they say about the review. I think they're more used to going to plays and other sort of theatre art forms, and that can sometimes come through when you could sort of tell that the reviewer didn't really enjoy the night, but it sounded like Isla had a pretty good time at my show, which I was very grateful. I do want to defend myself slightly with the line about turning away the guy looking through the door. That wasn't it wasn't something I did on purpose. If I remember correctly, he kind of peeked his head into the performance space, and I just said hi or something, and he asked what was going on, and I said it's a comedy show, and he said all right, and then I sort of wasn't really sure what the what the procedure was here, so I just said, have you got a ticket? And then he went, oh no, and then like backed off straight away. So I didn't feel like I turned him away. I just sort of wasn't sure what the procedure is here when people want to come in and watch like halfway through. I don't think he would have come in, but not intentional on my part. And again, coming back to the reviewers don't necessarily visit a lot of stand-up shows. In my experience, the guy standing at the back of the room who walked in midway through the show, didn't pay to get in, and is not really sure what's going on, they can typically be problem audience members because they don't pay, so they don't have any stakes in the night. So yeah, I sort of wanted to address that quickly, just based on some terrible experiences I've had with guys walking in like midway through a comedy show and then just derailing the whole thing by heckling and everything like that. I don't think that guy was likely to be like that, but let's just say I've been burnt before. So yeah, wanted to see to that early. But I mean, otherwise it was a positive review, so I breathed a big sigh of relief reading that. And I look forward to, hopefully Bad Apple will send somebody to check out my show next year. Alrighty, so let's get on to the actual interview at hand. Today's guest is Chris Ingham. He is a stand-up comedian and doctor. He is based up in the Manawatu. I hope I said that correctly. The guys up there always love to have a wee giggle at my pronunciation of Manawatu. I don't know what I'm saying wrong, but every time I say it, they seem to laugh. So whether it's meant to be Manawatu, I don't know. Palmerston North is where they're based. I've known Chris for several years now. I've been travelling sort of up to Palmerston North for shows for several years, since before pandemic started, and Chris is in a musical duo with another very good friend of mine, Richard Dryden. They are I think their duo is called The Dueling Mangoes, and they just did a show called My Comical Bromance, which is a fantastic name for a comedy show. Chris is, I would describe him as being one of the deadliest gag merchants in the country. He's a one-liner guy, a puns guy, and he's just like an assassin. He's an absolute hitman. He will hit puns just in everyday conversation that nobody else saw coming. So he's a real menace to behold. I think in terms of joke one-liner comics around New Zealand, I can only think of about 5 or 6 of us. There's me, there's Chris Ingham, there is Sam Jones from last week as a little bit of a gag merchant. There is, I think, a fellow called Nathan Bond from Wellington. There's Advait from Wellington. And then I think that might be just about everyone. There was a guy called Josh Ritchie in Dunedin, but I'm not quite sure if he's still gigging at the moment. Either way, it's a very, very short list of us in the whole country, and Chris is one of the best. We've been trying to do this interview for ages. The last time I actually saw him in person was when he had his knee injury that I think we talk about at some point in the interview. And this was probably in 2020, so it has been several years of us trying to tee this up, but we finally got a time slot. Very appreciative to Chris for giving up his bit of time in his evening for that. We talk about ultra running, ultra marathons. I'm not quite sure what the correct term is. I have an aunt and uncle that are really into this, so it was interesting for me to get to ask a few questions about how it all works. So with that, enough blabber. Let's get the man of the hour on the show, please, ladies and gentlemen, everybody in between. Welcome to the show, Chris Ingham. Good evening, Chris. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Taylor. It's good to be, sitting in my own house, but it's good to be here.
We probably have been talking about doing this podcast for 2 or 3 years now, I think. My timeline for this is how many injuries you've had from the running in this since we've been talking about doing this podcast. So I feel like the first time we spoke about it, you had just hurt your knee doing.
I think, yeah. So that was an experience. That was the big one. That was 2 weeks in hospital, 4 surgeries, bugs in my knee that nobody really knew what they were for a while.
I guess just before we get into the weeds on that, we are going to be talking about ultra running today. Did you have a quick kind of elevator pitch for the audience as to what the difference between regular running and ultra running is?
Well, it depends which angle you're coming from. Technically, ultramarathon running is basically running anything over a marathon in distance. The thing that I think gravitates a lot of people towards ultra running, other than the challenge of doing something you don't know if you're going to do or not, you don't know if you're going to be able to do. Personally, it's a lot easier than running a marathon.
Really?
I feel, yeah.
I guess my question would be, what makes it so much? Because I guess for the listeners, your background, how long have you been ultra running for?
On and off, mostly off rather than on. Probably
That's a great way to put it.
based on injuries, children, pregnancies, not my own pregnancies, but my wife's pregnancies. On and off about 11, 12 years now, I think. There was I think about 12 years ago I did my first one. Went for about 3 or 4 years, doing a couple a year. Then we had kids and it kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
So about,
I guess, were you a marathon runner before that?
I'd run a couple of marathons. The thing with marathons, and this comes back to why I prefer ultra running, marathons tend to be done on the street in front of people. So you have the pressure to keep on going, the pressure to be looking like you're enjoying it, finding it easy.
But not so with an ultra marathon.
Not so. I mean, I suppose with a marathon, it's over quicker. That's one of the bonuses. With ultra running, it tends to be off road in forests, in the bush around lakes. It's a lot more acceptable to walk.
Oh.
It's a lot more acceptable to walk. Certainly up the hills, you're expected to walk. And they have these things called the aid stations, which are basically big buffet tables out in the forest.
Man, this actually sounds like something I could get into if they got buffet tables and you're allowed to walk. I think I might be an uncrowned ultra marathon champion waiting to happen there.
Unfortunately, you need to get between the buffet tables, but
that might be my first roadblock.
The way I put it to my kids is basically it's a day of traveling in between children's birthday party food through some nice countryside.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree that sounds like paradise.
Sounds
really
lovely, yeah. How long does your typical ultra marathon tend to last?
It depends. The one that I thought we were going to be talking about a bit more today, which is one I'd never think of doing. So the Barclay Marathons, which has received a little bit of press recently, which I think is got this reputation as being the tough one. I mean, they're all fairly tough.
Yeah.
Um, where do you want to start with it's a race that was devised in the 1980s, I think, by this guy called Lazarus Lake. Lives in Tennessee, and
What
the
one thing that might be interesting for the listeners to learn is there are a few peculiarities. Like the people that race have to bring a license, like a car license plate with them, right?
I, I think the whole race, right from its inception and what happened, to inspire Lazarus Lake to make this race is a whole peculiarity.
Really? What was this? What was? Yeah,
But
please talk us through
back,
that.
back in the 1980s, the name for the guy who assassinated Martin Luther King tried to escape from this jail in Frozen Head Forest Park in Tennessee. He didn't get very far. He was caught 60 hours later, and he'd made about 8 miles. And Lazarus Lake looked at this and he said, "Yeah, surely I could get further than 8 miles in 60 hours," which is, it's a fair assumption to make.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, until he saw the type of terrain that was at this Frozen Lakes Forest Park,
Yes.
and that inspired him to basically make this race with a time limit of 60 hours.
So it was
Um,
all inspired by a famous assassin trying to escape the cops.
trying to escape prison. Yeah,
Oh, prison, sorry. Wow, that's
prison. Yeah.
fascinating. I didn't catch that. Because I watched a little bit of the documentary that you sent me, and then I did a little bit of
Mm.
research about it, but I didn't catch that. But that is that's fascinating.
The whole race is just absolutely bizarre.
Yeah.
It's a loop race that he sets. He says it's a 20-mile loop. Nobody has measured it, but official estimates are actually about 26 miles or so.
Right, right.
Um, but he bans GPS. Any of the athletes can carry GPS watches or modules or anything. So nobody knows how long it is. The best estimate's maybe 130 miles.
Because they get a sort of you
Um,
have to apply for it, and then they only pick a
yeah,
certain few people that can actually race it each year or something, right?
you have to apply for it, but nowhere can you find how to apply for it.
Oh,
There's no website. There's very little internet presence for this race officially.
yeah.
So your best chance is to find somebody who's done it in the past. Ask them when's best to send this application in, and then you've got to write an essay about why he should let you run the race.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Um, but yeah, if you're right, I think I should run this race because I think I'll be good at it, or I want to challenge myself. Yeah, that's not going to be a good enough excuse
Yeah,
for Leather to sweep you in. It's
you got to stand out.
you got to stand out. So he lets in 35 people a year. The entry fee is $1.60 US.
Has that been affected by inflation over the years?
I think he's kept it fairly stable.
Hell yeah.
Um,
Recession
and
proof.
then, as you say, your first year running, you have to bring a license plate from your own country or your own state.
And so it is international
Um,
people from all over the world can compete.
I think it started fairly local, fairly but basically invitational, I suppose.
Yeah.
But as the legend grew, um, more and more people. There was one of the guys who finished it this year was a New Zealander.
Hell yeah.
You get some people coming across from Europe, around the States, Canada. Um, so it is an international event.
Very cool. Yeah.
Um, if you come back for a second time or subsequent times, he gets you to bring him a new item of clothing. Usually, like he decides one year
What?
he doesn't have enough shirts or he needs some more socks. So
So was
that's
is
your entry fee.
the guy who manages it all, is this like his day job or is it just more like a hobby to him?
I think it's more a hobby. I think I read somewhere he's a basketball coach or something.
That's great. And
But
they start by blowing a whistle or firing a gun or something. There was a conch,
oh
wasn't
right, there's no set start time. You're told turn up on these dates, and at some point between midnight and midday, we're going to start the race.
Wow.
So an hour before the race starts, he comes out of his tent and he blows a conch, and that tells everybody you've got an hour to prepare.
Yeah.
Apparently this year a car alarm went off at about 3 in the morning, and
Uh,
a lot of people sprinted out and thought there
oh,
was
that's
a bomb,
funny.
started getting ready. And he
The
waited for them all just to get back to bed, and then he got out with his conch.
Yeah, yeah. You got to what do you call it? Respect traditions or whatever. The
Mm.
and you said that the terrain that they're running in is quite tough. Would this be like the toughest ultra marathon out there, or is this just middle of the pack kind of in terms of difficulty?
I think that this is considered the tough one, the
Really?
toughest.
Yeah.
It's the topography, the climb is if you complete all 5 loops, and not many people do. We'll probably come to that a bit later on, but
Yeah.
if you complete all 5 loops, you've roughly climbed the height of Everest twice over
Wow.
60 hours. Um,
And it takes people
it's,
weeks to climb Everest, right? That is
it takes a
insane.
while.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
it's not on it's not on tracks. It's probably about 80-90% cross country,
yeah.
through fairly thick bush,
So
thorny
they were
thorny bush.
using those sort of like hiking poles to go up the hills as well, right?
Mm,
Is that
absolutely, yeah.
is that typical for ultra running?
Yeah. Usually, you see 50% of an ultra running field out using the hiking poles.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of weight off your legs when you're going up the hills. So
that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah,
especially if you're climbing Everest, then you don't want all of
if
that
you're
on your
climbing Everest
knees.
twice,
Yeah,
you don't see many people up Everest with them though. So
yeah, that is
I
weird.
don't know.
I don't know how that works out. Maybe because it's spread out over. Maybe it's nothing's as steep on Everest or something. I don't know. I've never
Well,
climbed
I
Everest
think
nor
most of it are
done that.
fairly vertical.
Really.
Yeah,
Well, I guess in that you'd have those. What are those? Those like
people the axes and the crampons
the
and the
snow
ropes.
axes, yeah, that's right. I was gonna say, is the this race one that you would ever consider attempting yourself?
Oh, hell no, no. It's once you get into the trail running community, it's not got a very high profile outside, but it is this one weekend in kind of late March, early April every year. The whole trail running online community kind of stops and focuses on this race for 3 or 4 days.
Are you allowed to watch it online, or is it fairly like, is it like the Kumite? It's just, you go into the forest and then one person comes back with a trophy.
So that's another interesting, another one of the peculiarities. There's no media really
Hmm.
at this event at all. Um, the only live updates, as much as there can be live updates for something where you're going out for a loop, 12 hours later people come back, is done through one random guy's Twitter account. Um,
And so
so
everyone
so
just follows his account each time.
everyone follows Keith. This guy called Keith.
Keith,
For 3 days of the year, he is the center of the online trail running narrative.
I love it. How
Don't
did
know what he
he?
does the other
Yeah, I was gonna
362 days of
say,
the year, but
how did he sort of end up in? Is he someone associated with the the run, or like how did he kind of end up as the conduit for information?
he's just Keith. I think he turned up and did it one year, and people just kind of expected him to keep on doing it. I suppose.
he he desperately wants someone else to take it over, but every year he can't let the people down.
Of course, this year, with people drifting away from Twitter or X or whatever we should call it now,
Yes, indeed.
there's a bit of online panic as to how people are going to keep up with this race. But
Yeah, that's true. I wonder what they'll.
it,
I wonder what they'll do there.
there were
Are,
several.
are the races allowed to film? Because I'm assuming people are allowed to film because there was that YouTube video that you sent me.
Hmm. At the campsite. So there's a campsite right in the middle where they come back to at the end of every route, every loop. And yeah, it's another way in that it differs from the other ultra running races, I suppose, is you got to put on your own children's birthday party at the end of each loop. There's no aid stations out there.
Wait, so you got to bring
Um,
your own food?
you got to bring your own food. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know if you watch the documentary. They're eating things like burgers and Doritos and downing cans of Coke at the end of each
Well, because
There's a couple of bits where he's like, telling the support crew, stuff that burrito in my pocket there, and the burger in the pocket down there, and
is that's fairly common for long distance running. Is you need to, I think, what they call it carb loading. Have I got that right?
yeah. Well, it's basically just getting whatever you can into
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
If you run over a certain distance, your stomach starts doing funny things.
really. What kind of things?
The medical, mostly vomiting.
Oh,
Um,
right.
not unusual to be bringing up a bit of blood with that sometimes as well.
Oh, gosh. And this is if you
Yeah,
don't eat.
if you don't eat, or if you do eat and you eat the wrong thing, or just if you're out there for 30, 40K, you haven't had enough to drink, you're a bit dehydrated, your salt balance is a bit off,
Yeah,
just everything goes askew. The medical aspects of ultra running are a whole different
yeah.
conversation, I suppose.
Yeah, as you say, there's a lot of fascinating things the body does. Given that you're
Mm.
a medical professional, is that kind of part of the appeal to you? Is seeing what the human body is capable of, plus what what sort of horrors it goes through?
The horrors aren't particularly comfortable. I could probably do without them, but
Yeah,
they do come part and parcel of the running. Um, it's just seeing what I can do, I suppose, really.
as in this
Um,
is why your reason for running is to see what your sort of possibilities are.
yeah, I suppose and I think that there's what a lot of people come into the sport from is you're doing something that you don't know if you're going to finish or not.
Yeah.
If I'm
Is
on the
this
finish line in the
is ultra running kind of the peak of endurance sports? Is there anything else out there that's in this same kind of realm of like how long you're going through it?
I suppose things like your Ironman triathlons, double Ironman triathlons, that sort of thing. You've got ocean swimming. You've got people who do exceptionally long treks
Yeah,
through the wilderness, which is kind of on the same continuum. Yeah.
but there's not a long list of not a long list of things that push you to this kind of extreme.
I'm sure there's other stuff, transatlantic rowing, I suppose,
Yeah,
that sort of thing. But
for,
it's up there,
yeah, yeah.
certainly.
For you, when you're experiencing it, what kind of goes through your head? Are you very cognizant at the time, or is it like you do you have to regress back into like just as far as I need my legs to keep putting one step in front of the other? Like how, what is that process? What's that mentally like when you're in the middle of an ultra marathon?
You kind of block it out, I suppose. It's a hard question. You appreciate where you are. You do see a lot of really nice places. You appreciate the surroundings, the scenery. It's almost, it sounds really wanky, but kind of like almost a transcendental
Hmm.
state in a way. You
Yeah.
just kind of, until you reach that point where your legs are cramping and you might be peeing a bit of blood, and
Oh my
you're not
God.
keeping anything down. And then you're just wanting to know, where can I stop?
Hmm. At what point does that sort of happen? How far through the ultra marathon?
There'll be somewhere within again, it depends on the length, but
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
in the second half usually.
Wow. And that's
Um,
you've been going for sort of what, 20 hours at that point, 20, 40 hours, something?
again, depending on the point. I think the last 100 I did, which was also the first 100 I did, got to about 12 hours in, and I just hit a wall.
Yeah.
Was walking very slowly for another 7 hours. So
So, so
less
wait, you hit the
cramping.
wall at 12 hours and then you only had another 7 hours in you?
I had to get to the end. I couldn't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
stop.
So well, is that the thing where it's not loops, like you have to actually finish the trail to get back to where you started at?
Yeah, so the ones that we have here in New Zealand tend not to be so much the loop races where you're coming back every 20, 30K
Yeah,
or so.
yeah.
They're kind of point to point. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah, there's no real easy way out.
No, you just have to you once you're committed, you just have to finish
Just
finish
have
the
to keep on
race.
going.
When you go out for this, are you sort of family with you? Like you mentioned a support crew, like I guess you have someone waiting for you at the at the finish line, or how does it sort of work?
At certain points, you can have your support crew see you, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, that particular one where I hit the wall after 12 hours, um, due to certain circumstances, fire risk in forests and difficulties with traffic flow. My support crew would have see me until about, I think it was 86k into 100k race, which
Oh, wow.
is quite near the finish.
Yes, yeah. So they just have
So
to assume you're all good. Do you wear like a tracker or
they,
something like that in case something goes wrong?
they usually are GPS trackers. They're not particularly reliable, but the other thing is that they're big enough events that they know you're out there. If you
Yeah.
don't turn up, they're going to come out and find you.
Oh, that's good. I guess that somewhat leads nicely into my next question about injuries, because I think you've had one fairly serious injury that I think you'd had it not long after we ran into each other in Palmerston North. When was it? 2022 maybe?
It
We were
was,
doing,
what are we, 2021, it would have been.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
had a rock or something had went into your knee. Talk us through what happened there.
I'm still not quite sure what happened. That was a mere marathon, trial marathon.
Oh, so that was just a
Um,
regular marathon.
that was just a regular marathon.
Oh, one of
No,
those.
that was 10k into a race on the volcanic plateau. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I just found myself um, going down a hill and then going more vertically and hitting the ground hard.
Well, volcanic
Um,
rock is very sharp, isn't it?
yeah, I assume it must have been a volcanic rock or something. It wasn't actually sore.
Yeah.
I got up. I ran another 50 meters. I thought I'd better have a look down and see what I've actually done here, and noticed the half my knee was kind of hanging down my shin.
Oh, geez.
Um,
So I guess that comes back to the transcendental nature of it. Was that you were just running like you were kind of in the zone, I guess they would say. And then next thing you
yeah,
know, you were sliding down and then you went, oh, yep, I better keep going. And then you didn't feel any pain or anything like that.
more or less. The pain came um, once I stopped.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there was a medic on a motorbike, about 10 minutes behind me, I suppose.
Yeah.
Caught up and basically got a four-wheel drive to take me out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Is that the
Drove back to
worst
Palmerston
injury?
North 2 hours.
You're, when you're out in the middle of the bush, I guess that's the tough thing is if something goes wrong, you've got a long ride back to the hospital, don't you?
It was, yeah, I walked into the emergency department, went up to the nurse at the front desk and I said, look, I've cut my knee open. It at least needs stitches.
Yeah.
She said, when did this happen? I was like, about 6, 7 hours ago. And she said, why didn't you come in sooner? I said, well, I was kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I was there, like,
This is the earliest I could physically get here. So we've got about 10 minutes left in the Zoom. Is there anything you want to cover before we kind of run out of time?
um, I don't know, to be honest.
I'll just keep asking you questions then.
I think, yeah, I think yeah, we've pretty much covered the Barclays. We've pretty much covered the basics of ultra running.
Yeah. I guess my next question would be like when you have a major injury like that, do you ever think about giving it up, or is it like I guess what keeps you coming back to it? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it are you trying to break your records? Is it the actual process is enjoying? Like, I guess yeah. What makes it so what do you keep coming back for?
And my records are very, very mediocre. So I don't think it's so much breaking them. It's really hard to say because, as I
Yeah,
say, sometimes it's an absolutely miserable time out there. Um, I was just out training this weekend. I've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks' time. I found myself Saturday night on the top of the hills by Pararua, in the rain, the fog, the mist, really cold. Um, and yeah, actually, I loved it. So
yeah.
there's just something about those miserable conditions
I think
that keeps on bringing me back. Yeah.
yeah. I think you would have probably seen the theory that we're sort of we're built to run and because I saw a TED talk about how
Mm,
long distance running is one of the only sports where the further you go, the gap between women and men actually gets shorter and shorter up until the point where they're very
absolutely.
close.
Yeah.
And There was also something in there about as well, like your peak in your 20s, like most sports, you drop off real quick as you get older, but
mm,
people can be still hitting 60 or 70% of their peak when they're in their kind of old age. So yeah, there's something about running that I don't know, we're just we're just good at. I can't if that sort of encapsulates
I,
it, but yeah.
I think saying good at it is a bit of a stretch as well.
Right.
I think the other thing's the community as well, and you don't really get that in. I don't want to make enemies here for all the road running listeners to this podcast. Um,
We're throwing shade at you,
but
roadrunners. Me
the
who doesn't
trail
do
running
either.
community, the trail running community is something else. Everybody is out there supporting everybody else, from
Yeah.
the top guys to to the tail end. I was out running in Wellington yesterday. I met a guy who's also training for the event that I'm training for in a couple of weeks, and within 5 minutes we're just chatting along and best mates, and looking forward to catching up with him in a couple of weeks.
Oh, great.
But everyone's just trying to help each other, and it came down to that even at Barclays this year. Jasmine Paris was the first woman. So the thing about Barclays is only 20 people have ever finished it.
Wow.
And up until this year, it was, I think, 17 men over the 30, almost 40-year history of
Hmm.
the race have ever finished the 5 laps. And this year, for the first time ever, Jasmine Paris, a woman from Scotland, was the first woman to head out on the fifth lap. And knowing what it meant to her, but also to a lot of other people, so the last lap of the Barclays, they alternate which way you do it. So the first person goes out one way, the second person goes out the other way, and the guy who came in fourth offered her the chance to do it the easiest way, just as a genuinely nice thing to do, to knowing how much it meant to her, and that sort of, I suppose, selflessness almost,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
camaraderie. What's the word?
Camaraderie.
Camaraderie. That's the one. Yeah, amongst trail runners is something that you don't get in other sports sometimes.
Well, I think
Um,
I was talking about this about the strongman competition. There's a lot of camaraderie in that as well, and I wonder
mm,
if it's because you're not necessarily directly competing against, like someone else getting their best time doesn't have anything to do with you. You're only competing against your own, your how good you were yesterday, sort of thing. So maybe that's why. Maybe there's a sort of
yeah,
everyone knows that you're just trying to push your, you're all trying
everyone's
to,
competing against themselves, not each
yeah.
other. Yeah,
Yeah, and so because like I guess you will have races and stuff like that, but I think I would assume that people look at it less like they're beating other people and more like, we're all out here running together kind of thing.
you're beating yourself, beating
Yeah,
your
exactly.
own
Yeah,
own
exactly.
expectations. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um,
and you're eating
w-
some great food while you do it.
yeah, exactly. You're bringing a buffet out there. What is your kind of go-to? What do you like to eat when you're running?
Watermelon.
Oh, what is
I've never appreciated watermelon quite so much as I have when you've been running your 30, 40, 50, 60K.
do you just cut it in half and sort of eat that as you go, or do you have slices of it?
Oh, there's this race up in Rotorua every February, the Tarawera Ultra, and they buy hundreds of watermelons. They hack them up. They just have this pile of watermelon in tents every 10, 15K along the course.
Fantastic. Well, that's
Yeah,
basically the time there. So Chris also is a comedian. I'm sure I will have mentioned this at the start of the podcast. If the listeners out there would like to check out some of your stuff or just in general see more of you, where can they find you online, Chris?
so I'm on Facebook at Chris Ingham's Socialist Joke Weaponizer, I think it's called. Um, Alternatively, I'm in a double act with my friend and yours, Richard Dryden.
Ah, yes,
We're
big fan
called
of Richard.
the Dueling Mangoes,
Yep,
and
great name.
you can find him at Richard Dryden Mythmaker, and he is a lot more proactive in promoting our gigs than I am.
He's pretty good. Have you got any gigs coming
Oh,
up? Please go ahead.
and I just remembered I am also on Instagram now at Lol Gallagher.
Yes, you are. Is that anything to do with
On
Gallagher,
there.
the watermelon smashing comedian?
No, it's a pun on Noel Gallagher,
Ah,
and referencing that I play the guitar on stage.
fantastic. I feel like we'll eventually have to do a we both bring in a bunch of one-liners that we couldn't get to work and workshop them on the podcast, because you're also a
Oh,
fellow
that'd be
gag
amazing.
merchant.
I do my best, which is to say I also do my worst.
Hell yeah. Yeah, anything else to leave the good people of the good listeners of the podcast with?
Not really that I can think of. It's been a great time. Thank you for listening to me rabbit on about something that I enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's been great to learn about it. I appreciate you giving up. You're a very busy man. So it was good we finally managed to make it happen. So thanks for joining me, mate.
Absolutely.
And we'll try to have you back at some point.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.